Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast. I'm Chris Garner, joined once again with my co-host Tom Woods. Tom, it's been a while since we've done one of these things. I think the last one we did together was The Witch.
It was another horror film.
Yeah, we've since on the channel kind of become the horror guys. We don't go and see every horror movie that comes out. We kind of pick and choose which ones we're intrigued by, because with horror films, you do get a lot of duds. You do get a lot of trash that comes out. And this one I was really looking forward to. Today's review is The Conjuring 2, directed once again by James Wan. And the original Conjuring. A while back we did a countdown of our top 10 favourite horror films. I think that was me and Tate did that one.
I'm surprised he actually got through that.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, Tate is just a big no-no to all horror films or anything with high levels of tension or dread in it. There's something we've been discussing for a new series, which I won't go into completely in depth right now if it never pans out, but over Skype, I sent him the trailer. I think it was the first trailer that came out for The Conjuring 2, and his reaction to that was one of the most glorious things I've ever seen in my life. It was kind of amazing. And recently discovered as well, George also really doesn't like horror films. He just can't handle them. I know he didn't like Jaws. I think he watched that film when he was young, and then that's kind of like fucked him up for life. But
Jaws.
So me and you are the kind of only guys that can hold the fort on this channel with horror movies.
Yeah.
So as always, our reviews will be spoiler free for the first part, and then when we go into spoilers, we'll let you know so we don't give anything away. So The Conjuring 2, we'll go into our thoughts now on the first one. As I was saying, we did a countdown of our top favourite horror films, and I can't remember if this made it into my official countdown or if it was one of my honourable mentions. I loved the first Conjuring. Now, granted, it's been a while since I've seen it. I have seen it multiple times. I think I've seen it about 3 or 4 times in total, but it has been a while since I last watched it. It was a couple of Halloweens back, I think I checked it out. And I loved it. I mean, James Wan, as of now, has kind of proven himself to be one of the biggest names in directors of horror. He's done the Conjuring films, he directed the original Saw movie, and then since then he's done the Insidious films as well. So he is well versed in the horror genre, I would say, at this point. It seems to always be his go-to genre. I don't know if it's his favourite one. And the first one, whilst it didn't bring anything new to the table in terms of possession movies or haunted house movies, I think that all the scares in that were done very well, had some great performances. Love Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga in that first one. And I thought it was just a solid movie. Like, it didn't really leave off that it needed a sequel. I think you can watch the first Conjuring as its own thing, as a standalone piece. And then since then we got Annabelle. James Wan didn't have any involvement in that. He was probably an executive producer, I guess, or something on that. I haven't checked out that one. I heard unanimously bad things about that movie, so I've avoided it at all costs. I don't know if you've seen that one, but Tom, before you went to see Conjuring 2 earlier this afternoon, you told me that you rewatched the first one, and you have some thoughts on the first one. If you want to go into that a bit now.
Thoughts. I remember really, really enjoying it the first time I saw it, the first Conjuring movie, and I really liked Patrick Wilson, and as you mentioned, they are very good in it. Subsequently, my second viewing has not been all that great. I think I've rolled my eyes a few times at the various scares in it, and I think one of my problems is that it's just been done, but been done better.
Yeah,
and I must say I'm not a big James Wan fan. I don't particularly like his horror movies, the other horror films he's done. I remember really liking The Conjuring. That's probably the only one I've actually really liked. I didn't like Saw.
See, I love Saw. I love the Saw movies, apart from the last one.
I didn't like...
he did Dead Silence was one of his as well, wasn't it?
That was awful. Awful horror film. But there's something to be said about that, because it has a creepy doll in it.
Yeah, he likes his creepy dolls.
But I don't know, the second viewing of The Conjuring it just wasn't hitting the same beats as it did the first time when I watched it, and I just wasn't getting the same thrill. I don't know if that's kind of it was the middle of the day or what.
Yeah, I think with horror films, you kind of have to be in the moment with them. Like, it helps if you've got a good sound system, because so many horror films rely on the sound design and the sound mixing. I think lighting and environment definitely helps. This was it wasn't the first horror film I've seen in the cinema with Conjuring 2. I didn't actually catch the original Conjuring in the cinema. I really, really wish I had. I've watched the first 4 Paranormal Activity movies in the cinema. I think they've been the only horror experiences I've ever had in the cinema, unfortunately. The first couple were a very, very fun cinematic experience with a full crowd who were really into it. But this one I was really looking forward to being just a proper, decent, effective horror movie that I could be in the cinema to experience.
The trailers were really good. I thought the trailer they had was a very, very well made trailer and really pumped me up to go see it, because I remembered how much I liked the first one. It was really like, new Conjuring movie. But,
and with movies like this, with just horror sequels in general, they are notoriously hard to get effective and to get right. There always seems to be the law of diminishing returns with horror sequels. They either try and play it safe and just try and be a carbon copy of the original, and it never seems to work, or it tries to go completely opposite direction and everything's got to be bigger, everything's got to be louder and scarier and more of it, and just throw everything at the camera, and then it forgets its roots, forgets what made the original work so well, and it becomes something just terrible. And if we're going to go into rough thoughts before we go into the plot and the characters and things like that, I didn't think this was awful. I thought this was a perfectly enjoyable horror movie. Did I like it as much as the original? No. I think the original is perhaps a bit more effective with how it balances the characters in the film. Everything seemed very tightly knitted together in terms of the plot, whereas I found this one was a bit all over the place, and getting towards the ending of the film got a bit meandering. And this second one is at 2 hours 15 minutes, which is very long for a horror film, I would say. I know there have probably been some horror films longer. For example, The Shining is probably like around 2.5 hours or something like that, but I didn't check my watch all during this film, but I was kind of getting a bit restless towards the end, I think. And I don't want to be down on this movie. I think that James Wan's proven himself again. Still a great director in the horror genre, although I wasn't really a fan of the Insidious films, I'll be honest. But, I think it felt like this return to the franchise. Like, I saw the trailers for Annabelle, and you could tell that was a different person involved with that. It seemed like a cash-in. They wanted to keep people and audiences involved in it between the 3-year gap between the first one and this one. And performances wise, I think that most of the characters in this film are played effectively, the main two. There are some notable exceptions which we'll get into later, but I still had a thoroughly enjoyable time with this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we should also say we've talked a little bit about this film before recording. We haven't really gone in depth into it yet. We brought up a few points, but I know that you kind of differ in opinion on me. But the thing is as well, I actually think that I will agree with all of your points on this one.
Yeah,
but go for it.
My initial thoughts of it are that it's just, I don't know. It was so boring.
See, I didn't find it boring.
I found it very boring. Like, it's way too long for what it is for a start. I mean, you could have easily shaved a good half an hour off that, and it would have been a better movie for it. I don't think it built atmosphere very well. It was actually quite laughable in places. And to me, this is baby's first horror movie. If you want to watch a proper haunted house movie, go watch the original Amityville Horror. That's roughly the same length as this, but it keeps you interested, and it follows exactly the same beats as the first one. And the fact, I don't know, I just wasn't into it, and I found it quite sappy and a bit like every time
Yeah.
a jump scare or a scare in general came on, you knew exactly how it was going to play out. The camera moves towards the character, then it comes back out, then a scare happens, and it was just so predictable and so boring. I maybe jumped in the film 4 times, and it's the usual case of it being loud noises make you jump, like, because they're loud. But it just didn't build a decent atmosphere for me, and to be honest, I wasn't really into it. I thought it was just a semi-retread of the first movie, but just louder and a bit like more in your face and obnoxious. But I don't want to be like too negative because I don't think it's that bad.
Oh no, it's definitely a competently made movie. It's a well-made movie.
I just don't think it's great.
I think
it's not the worst thing.
No, I don't know. I think the ingredients of the first one were just stronger as a whole. I know you, as you said, like on your second viewing or whatever viewing it was when you watched it before to go and see this one, it didn't hold up as well. But I think there's something about the first one that feels a little bit simpler, maybe. And simpler isn't always good, but I think that it was effective more so than this one. I think this one tries to juggle a bit too much, and it gets a little bit convoluted towards the end. But we're going to get into it more in depth now. We'll go over the plot now. So this is inspired by true events, and I use the
quote
words,
unquote true.
Yeah. Oh, so many inverted commas around that word true. So the plot: in 1977, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren travel to London, England, where single mother Peggy Hodgson believes that something evil is in her home. When Peggy's young daughter starts showing signs of demonic possession, Ed and Lorraine attempt to help the besieged girl, only to find themselves targeted by the malicious spirits. So, I mean, it's a solid setup for a horror movie. With most horror films, it's really difficult to break the mold after a certain point, and it's just kind of a case of how you show it, how you deal with the scares. I like that they moved it to England. It's nice that we get a horror film set over there for a change. And what I think is effective with this movie, and with the first one as well, is the ability of James Wan to bring humanity to it. How many horror films have we seen recently where we get to the end and we say, we didn't care who died in it, we didn't care about anyone in the film, they were all lined up for the meat grinder, and you don't care. With this one, I think it does an effective job of showing the family in it, and it's not just the main family involved, it's also the couple of played by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. I think that their chemistry together is amazing. And I went on record on my Facebook. I said that Ed and Lorraine Warren in the movie are probably the second best cinematic on-screen couple since Morticia and Gomez Adams. They will forever and always be the power couple. But I think their chemistry it really shows. They feel like a believable couple. You can tell they really love each other. There are parts of the film where it may get a little bit too sentimental, but I don't know. I was kind of on board with that. I like that stuff in the film. And the main family, I thought, were acted fairly well. However, being from England myself, there were some questionable accents in there.
Think Dick Van Dyke.
Oh yeah. So it started off with them, and I wasn't noticing it much. But as it got through the film, it was a bit, oh fucking hell, Mary Poppins. It was a bit, yeah.
Chim chimney, chim chimney, chim chim charoon.
So there were bits like that it didn't take me out of the movie, because I just sort of rolled my eyes and went, oh, this is what happens when people from America try and give their idyllic view of London, England.
Well, actually,
everyone has to talk
you know
like
what they
that.
did. You know what they did get right about
What's that?
Britain or England.
The housing?
It rained an awful lot.
It did, and the actual street as well. I thought that whole neighbourhood and everything is noticeably British. I thought they recreated that very, very well. And then when you look at pictures of the actual haunted location, as I said, this was inspired by true events. It does look effectively like it. I have watched the documentary now. Someone told me to watch that before going to see this film, so you had more context for stuff, but I kind of wanted to go into Conjuring 2. I knew it was going to be its own thing. It was going to do what it had to do, and I wanted to experience that first. Then I watched some news footage and documentary of the Enfield case, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And that documentary, you can find it on YouTube. It is such a fakery. The film itself plays it straight, and it's like, this is an actual possession, actual exorcism, all that stuff. Whereas the actual documentary, you can tell that everyone involved was just faking it, which did kind of disappoint me a bit after seeing this film. But that's what you're going to get with sort of like true life haunting cases and things like that. So we'll get into scares a bit now. We'll kind of, the spoiler-free section, we're just glossing over everything, because with a horror film, it's very difficult to talk about it in depth without giving everything away and all our favourite scares. So you were talking more about the jump scares, and I want to get into that more.
Yeah.
Because I'm inclined to agree with you on this one. That the points you made about it seeming, the scares seemed more formulaic in this one. Do you think that's a case of us just being privy to a lot of horror films, and we're just able to kind of see the scientific formula that goes into it, and when scares are going to crop up?
I suppose so, but I mean, there's the whole thing about, if, as I mentioned, it's the camera pans into a character, and then it pans out, and then something's there, something's quote unquote scary. But I don't know. I think holding a lingering shot is more effective, and actually not having anything there is it's the whole case of if you see the monster, you're kind of brought out of it, which is much of what I've found in this, is that,
oh boy, does this film show the monster
much too early on.
It
was showing an awful lot that kind of, I don't know, for me, thought, well, okay, I know what it looks like now. I'm not going to be as invested as I was in it. I mean, one thing I think you're right about, which is Ed and Lorraine, Patrick and Vera, yeah. They are good on screen. They are good, and I will say that they were good in the first one as well. I just think everything else around them's a bit hokey and a bit kind of, I don't know, the accents bothered me.
Yeah, see, I was managed to look past that. I noticed it, but I just kind of went with it because I knew I know how these films go. This isn't my first rodeo with bad English accents.
Especially the main girl in it, Janet. I can't remember the actress's name.
Frances O'Connor. I've just got the cast list up here,
and we know that she's born in like Louisiana, and you could pretty much, you could tell it was kind of like, yeah, I'm from England. Believe me, I'm from England. People...
I'm checking out a profile now. Sorry, it says. Let me just check if I have actually got the right. Oh no, sorry, no. Frances O'Connor, my bad, played the mom. Madison Wolfe. Madison Wolfe played the girl. I'm just gonna confirm if she is. Yeah, she is an American actress. Yeah.
It's quite clear. Some of it. So I mean, there are some characters I liked. I don't see, the thing for me is that I just came out of the cinema going, okay, that's something to forget about. I thought it was genuinely forgettable. Although I did like the guy with the old guy in it.
Yes.
What was his name? He was quite good. I can't remember his name.
Do you mean the guy who was helping him through the investigation?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's literally been like an hour, and I've already forgotten pretty much every character's name, apart from Ed and Lorraine Warren.
The character's name is Maurice Grosse, and he's played by Simon McBurney. I've seen him in a bunch of UK TV dramas and things like that. He's a solid actor. He was in Mission Impossible 5 as well. He played the British Secret Service head of, I think. You went to see Mission Impossible 5, right?
No.
Oh, didn't you?
I missed it. No. Yeah.
Oh, it's a great film. You need to check that out.
I did. I really liked him in it, but I think I don't know. My kind of just rambling at this point. It's only been like 10 minutes into the review, but my problem with it is it's just louder and a bit more annoying.
See, it's definitely louder, I would say, and I'm going to go into the scares in a bit. I'm just going to kind of punctuate what you said about the characters in it. As you said, the main couple in it, fantastically played. And I like the characters' moments in the film. There's a scene that's in the trailer, so this isn't giving anything away, where Lorraine Warren is sitting on the swings with the character of Janet, and they have a nice heart-to-heart moment. And when the movie does that, it's nice, because typical run-of-the-mill horror films, they just rely on the scares and nothing around it. So I like that it has that bit of humanity basis to it. It does take its time with the character scenes. They never feel rushed or arbitrary. They feel in place with the film. Now, the scares for me in this one, this is where I will agree with you. They definitely feel a lot more telegraphed in this one. There are some jump scares in the movie which I think are earned. This is my take on jump scares, and you'll probably hear this spiel in every single horror film we do a review on. Most horror films now solely rely on the jump scare mechanic, and it's not scary. It's a tool that you can use alongside atmosphere and everything like that to broaden it as a whole and to make the scare work. When you just rely on the actual jump scare, I'm looking at Sinister here, it becomes irritating. It's you jump at the loud noise of the orchestra and the sudden spike in volume. You aren't drawn in by the actual horror or disturbing imagery or whatever it is that's happening on screen. This one, I feel, builds tension effectively. Not as good as the first one, but I think there are some scenes in this where I was kind of reclining back in my chair and like bracing myself for something to come. And there were a few scares towards the start of the film which didn't get that punchline of the jump scare. It builds and builds and builds, and you think something's going to happen, and it doesn't. And when the film does that enough times, I think it's effective. However, it did get to about the halfway point in this film, and I started to consciously notice the increase in jump scares that were happening. And you're right, they all appeared around the same time. I kept thinking in my mind, like, James Wan's better than this. He knows that scene where the camera zooms in on the character and they look and nothing's there, it will cut back to them, it will cut away again, and that's where the jump scare is going to happen. I was like, James Wan's not going to do that because he's smart. That's what every other horror film does. He's not going to do that. And it happened again and again and again, and every jump scare that cropped up, it was always the same mechanic. I could always pinpoint it, and this is what I was saying to you before we hit record. It was about the halfway point of this film. I would say I started tuning out of this film a little bit after the scene. No spoilers, but there's a scene where they're trying to communicate with the spirit in the chair. And I think after that scene, that's where I started to peter out of the film a bit, because the scares did get very over the top. There's one in particular, which I'm saving for the spoiler section, which was downright laughable. When the film's being more subtle, like there's some scenes where a character will go down some stairs or something, and you'll just see something in the background. And there won't be any orchestra sting or music build-up or anything like that. You're consciously aware of it in the background. And that's what makes it creepy the most. This was, if I'm going with the first one, I think the most effective scare for me in the first Conjuring film was the maid that shows up. And you see the character in the background, and your brain just has enough time to clock onto it and see it, and then that's when the scare will happen.
Yeah, but that was ruined in itself by a jump scare straight after.
Is it the maid scene?
Yeah.
See, it's been a while since I saw it. I thought
he walks over to where she was, and then she just pops next to him, goes, "Oh, look what she made me do."
See, I thought you saw her in the background before, so your brain had enough time to see it. Yeah.
So, but then it just descends into a jump scare, which is kind of what I don't like. I agree with you that what makes these films scary are the moments where you see something in the background that doesn't necessarily make you go, oh, jump out of your seat, but just builds, like you think something's going to be around the corner, and then you see, so corner of your eye, it's it's making you look at every frame in the movie and just kind of pinpointing where you think stuff is going to happen, which is kind of why I liked the first Paranormal Activity so much. But and that's what I think makes a good horror film, among loads of other things. But this just descends into jump scare after jump scare after jump scare, and then completely falls apart at the end. Just completely, just collapses.
It does go with a big bombastic conclusion in this one, doesn't it? Definitely more so than the first one. The first one was just sort of a simple exorcism, and I think she was like chasing them through the house or something, wasn't she, if I remember rightly? The mother character in it. But that seemed to work, and it seemed to be a logical conclusion. This one, it builds up throughout the film. There's like a sort of subplot that runs alongside the film, and then that sort of becomes the main plot at the end, and it all interconnects and everything like that. So I think that's where the bombastic conclusion kind of ruined this film. I think it could have benefited with a much more simpler one and still be much more effective. So before we get into spoilers, do you want to just give a positive and negative on this movie and your overall recommendation?
A positive. I didn't
Come on, you
hate
gotta have one.
it.
Yeah.
That's kind of, but I don't know, for me it wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't the worst horror film I've ever seen, but and I don't think it was particularly that good either. It was kind of somewhere in the middle. It was okay. I mean, it was competently made for what it was. I'll agree with that. It was well shot. There you go, that's a positive.
And
it had good music as well.
Yes, I actually will go into the music very briefly now. Joseph Bishara, I think that's how you pronounce it. I think he's returning from doing the music to the first movie. Just going to very, very briefly
verify
that. Yes, it is. There's a theme that I absolutely love in this film, and it's like a soft piano theme. It usually plays towards the end, or I guess it's Ed and Lorraine's theme. Really, really love that one. Very nice piece of music. And also the music that plays with the almost Star Wars-like title crawl at the beginning of the film is very, very effective. And the credits music, too, is very good.
Oh, yeah. Here's another thing. A positive. When you come out, you'll want to listen to Elvis.
Yes.
And also watch the original Amityville Horror, because it's a much better movie.
Is the Elvis thing a spoiler? I don't know. We're about to get into spoilers.
It will make you want to go listen to some Elvis records.
It will. I'm a huge Elvis fan.
Songs.
Yeah. Positive and negative for me. I will agree. I think it's well shot. I think the first half of the film is definitely stronger than the final half. It has some great performances, especially Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson. A lot of the other characters as well, although there are some questionable accents if you can look past that. Music-wise and just how everything's filmed and shot and framed, I think it's very effective. My negative, however, is that with this film, it does seem like there is a slight more tendency towards the jump scare mechanic, and I think that this film could have benefited without that. Also, on top of that, me going on my CGI spiel, there are some very brief shots with some very questionable CGI, and I think with this film, like, you can tell that James Wan was definitely inspired by and influenced by horror films of like the late 60s and the 70s with this one, with like the haunted house films. So when you do get some CGI shots in there, they just feel really out of place. And I think that some scares, which we're going to get into in a minute with the spoilers, were very laughable, over the top, and did kind of draw me out of what was otherwise a very decent horror film, in my opinion. So, right, let's go straight into spoilers then. So, you were just talking about the Amityville horror film, and that's exactly where this film opens up. The first movie had a prologue with the Annabelle doll and sort of the origins of that, I guess, before we got the Annabelle movie. This one, I was really intrigued. Like, when they said we're starting here, I was like, ooh, I've heard of this. I haven't seen the Amityville horror movie, but I've heard great things about it. I'm going to let you start off with this one, because you've seen it and you seem to be a bit more knowledgeable about that kind of thing. What did you think of the opening of this movie?
Stupid.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about the...
ridiculous. I mean, yeah. It
I
was
guess
ridiculous.
we should have some setup for this. So the character of Lorraine has this ability. It's covered in the first one. It's sort of shown more abstractly in this one. When she goes and sees her visions, it almost like she leaves her body, and it really reminded me of the Insidious stuff. I've only seen the first Insidious film, but I remember when everyone's asleep and Patrick Wilson's still walking around.
Yeah.
It's like an out-of-body experience. It's kind of played like that, and it's the level of, is she dreaming? Is she having a premonition? Or is this actually happening? Or kind of all three in one. And they're doing a seance around the table, and she's experiencing all these horrific things that happen to this family, almost as if she was doing it herself. And the character's got a gun. I don't know what kind of gun it is. Is it a rifle or something? And he's going from room to room, shooting all of his family members. And it's like she's doing it with an imaginary gun. And she's cocking it, she's loading it like a gun, but it's imaginary, and it looked very ridiculous. And it reminded me of when I was a kid on the playground playing army or playing soldier or action man or something and pretending to have a gun. It was one step away from her about to do the sound effects of the actual gun.
Yeah, If you need a recreation of this particular scene, go watch Peter Kay. Go watch
Yes.
Peter Kay clip, and he will do the perfect representation of what this scene was like for me watching it. I honestly thought, are you really starting off with this? She goes room to room, and then what we do is we go downstairs. Or we go into the basement, rather, and where you see all the ghost children that she's just murdered, and then it shows you the spooky monster, and then you go, okay, so I guess I've seen it now. Thanks for ruining it for me, movie.
Yeah, definitely. And the nun character visually is a great looking villain or ghost.
I'll disagree with you there. I thought she looked very kooky, a bit hokey. And the thing she does with her mouth where she opens it and is just basically just spikes coming out is just like, what are you doing?
Let me parenthesize that with, from a distance, it looks great.
Well, I mean, nuns are spooky in general. They're just like.
But I agree. I think it's the showing too much too early, I think. And as the film unfolds, you can kind of tell how it's all going to play out with this subplot. I'm going to get into that subplot now, actually, because I think that's probably the big bulk of the story. Yeah. So what happened to Ed and Lorraine's daughter? Because she is in this movie, and she's in the scene where she's kind of in the study or whatever, and her mum's sleeping. Then her mum goes into this vision, and then she sees her daughter in there, and the daughter's seen the nun, and Lorraine tells her daughter to get back inside and hide, and then she goes and tries to take on the ghost herself. And I don't think we actually ever see the daughter again from that point, do we?
She wakes up from the vision, and then she's sat there while she's scribbling away on her Bible.
Oh, yeah. But there's no kind of tie-up or anything with that. I think in the first movie, the daughter doesn't really have much to do in that film, but she's kind of tied into a plot where the ghost might be going after her, or the Annabelle doll. So she had something to do. I'd be inclined to just have written the daughter out of this film almost entirely, and just have them show up in England and just say, "Oh, the daughter's being looked after," or something like that.
That leads into one of the funniest bits of the movie for me, is when you talk about the daughter and she's sitting there and she has the vision. There's a scare which actually starts up quite well. There's a good setup for it where she enters the room where Patrick Wilson paints all of his pictures. There's the original Conjuring house in there, and then you get behind her. It lingers quite a lot, which I quite liked, on the painting of the weird, creepy nun. And then, as the scare goes on, you see her fingers come round the painting, which I thought was quite effective. But then it just descends into farce.
Yeah.
Where she just launches herself with the painting in front of her face. going, and then Lorraine gets launched into the closet, and then it goes into another vision where she sees some bloke getting stabbed, and then
that's her husband, isn't it? And that's where the CGI comes in for me. The awful CGI skewer wooden stake thing that just erupts from his chest.
Oh, and the nun still going.
Yeah. And you're right. That scare started up so well. You get the really creepy Christmas music playing, the hymn that plays on the tape recorder, and when you see like the shadow walking across the wall and position itself behind the painting, that stuff was great. And you're right, when she launches away, if she'd emerged through the painting almost like a T-1000 and like phased through the painting, that may have been more effective. Or here's an idea: don't even launch at Lorraine, just stand there, because the scene where you said where it lingered on the painting and it almost looked like it was glow in the dark paint on the eyes, and you couldn't tell if the figure was already there or if it was still the painting. That stuff was great, the visual stuff in this. And there's one other visual scene which I want to get into, which I thought was a really effective use of CGI animation. There was something else I wanted to talk about, this scare with the nun. Oh yes, I know what I wanted to talk about. Now, with sequels, they always try and answer, well, not always, most of them try and answer some unanswered questions from the first movie. However, there is one that is alluded to in this and given away, which I feel cheapens a moment from the first movie. One of my favourite bits from the first film is where Patrick Wilson and Lorraine, Ed and Lorraine talk about a previous case they were on where something went horribly wrong. Lorraine saw something horrific when this guy who was possessed sort of like grabbed a hold of her, and she saw something, and she's never been able to shake it, and you can tell it's damaged her. Like, even when she's fine now, that one moment has had an impact on her, and they even refer to that in this, saying that, if something bad happens like it did at the Amityville case, we need to get out of there. However, they say what the vision was that she saw from the first movie, and that it was that Ed died. She saw Ed die, and that's lasted with her this whole time. I could have done without that.
Yeah.
I think that could have just worked with the vision that she had from this nun character from this movie.
I agree.
I don't think that the events needed to be connected or interlinked. And now when you watch the first movie and you know what she saw, I think that's going to ruin that moment for me on another watch, because I thought that was a question that didn't need answering. That was the great thing about it, was the ambiguity of what the hell did she see that made her go like that.
Yeah, it could have been that she saw hell itself,
like Cthulhu or something.
Yeah, like just something that just wasn't. Oh, Ed dies.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
So, I mean, that didn't really... It wasn't like a film-breaking thing for me, but I was just like, ugh, I could have done without knowing that, Can we talk about some of my favourite scares in this movie? We've got to talk the Crooked Man. We've talked about the nun, or Valak, or whatever her name is. We need to talk the Crooked Man. Oh boy. This was... I can't tell if this was just stupid or this was one of the most enjoyable things in this movie for all the wrong reasons. Okay, so the kids in this film, I don't even know what you call them. It's those almost flip book kind of movie maker things that like spin round on a carousel with the light in the middle, and they've got one on the Crooked Man. Now, the Crooked Man is a nursery rhyme that was never read to me as a kid. I've heard about the Crooked Man from the Wolf Among Us video game by Telltale Games, and I heard the rhyme in this. I thought, okay, that makes sense. I could have done without the giant lumbering stop-motion animation Jack Skellington, Henry Selick looking thing that chases them down the corridor. And this is what I mean with this film being too busy. So in this film, you haven't got just one spirit, which like it was in the first one. I know you got some other side ones, but the main threat of that film was just the thing that possessed the mom. In this one, you've got Bill Wilkins, which we'll get into in a minute, which I thought was great and could have carried the film. You had the nun, and then you also throw the Crooked Man in there too. And then I think at the end of the film, it's a very rushed bit of exposition. I think it's when they're on the train and they're ready to come home or whatever they're on, whether it's a bus or a train, and they realise they've got to go back. Like, there's a huge exposition dump there, and I think they say something like that the Crooked Man and Bill Wilkins are projections.
The Crooked Man was a projection of this this evil demonic nun.
Right.
But Bill Wilkins was used by the
that's
nun.
right.
And this for me, it was just Patrick Wilson's moment of realization for this, because he's had gargled like recordings, and his moment of realization is he drops the two recordings on the floor accidentally and they cross over each other, and then he goes, oh, it's like a light bulb switches on, and he's just like slap in the face, go, what? And then he plays the recordings, and you just say, how did he get this idea from that? I would have, you know what, actually, thinking about it now, I would have much preferred the film to, I know they sort of delve, they sort of like, I don't know, like paddle in the waters of this, but the fact that it was kind of a dubious claim on behalf of the real life hauntings, that would have made for quite a good film. Is it real? Is it not real? They delve into it kind of a little bit. But I think this film definitely sways to one side, though, doesn't it? Yeah.
But you're right. There were moments where it does plant that doubt.
But it would have. That would have made a really, really interesting film. That it would have brought a new light to both the characters, as in most of the stuff they see, they can just explain away rationally, and it would have made me feel, especially, that they were people who look rationally into things, but then when they can't explain something, they delve into the paranormal.
Yeah, and there were moments in this film where it did kind of deal with that stuff. You're right. The biggest scene for me, and probably my favourite scene of the film, was where they've got the girl. What's the name of the girl again? Just having a look. They've got Janet. They've got Janet in the chair, and they tell her that she's got to take a sip of water and hold the water in her mouth to see if the voice does actually come from her like a ventriloquist, or if it's something, not of this world. And they'll just hear the voice anyway. And Janet tells them to look away because the voice doesn't want to come out of her when they're looking at her. And right from there, you can say, oh, well, they looked away, she spat the water out, she did the voice, and then she took another sip. But the effect of this, and I think it was CGI when it cut back, but it was seamless, like this whole scene where Patrick Wilson turns away and the pull focus on it, everything's out of focus behind him, and you can make out Janet, and then it's like it morphs into Bill Wilkins, and you only see the outline of his face, you see his mouth opening a little bit, and it just lingers on this one shot. It's almost like a one-shot take, I think. I can't remember if it cuts to anyone else's reactions, and it was great to look at. I just loved that morphing animation, and like I said, the CGI in this film is bad. I thought that was an effective use of it. And then it pull focuses back, and Janet comes back into focus once that scene's played out. That was probably my favourite scene in the film. And everything with the Bill Wilkins character, I loved. And in all honesty, I thought that his spirit, that character, could have carried the entire film. I didn't need the whole nun thing. I didn't need the subplot with that. You could have gone into it a little bit, that Lorraine was tormented and tortured by something that she'd seen from the Amityville. That's fine. I don't know if it needed to all connect into this big over-the-top action climax of Patrick Wilson getting blinded by some hot steam and then awkwardly stumbling throughout the entire house. That was a bit ridiculous. And then, as I said, when you see that thing of oh, my phone is going off. When you get that scene of where she sees Ed die with the skewer go through his chest, you kind of know how ultimately it's going to play out, especially when the lightning strikes the tree and splits and in a convenient spike. Yeah.
I'll agree. What I do want to say is a slight criticism of the movie. You know where the kid is walking around and he like steps on the truck and it makes the really loud, horrendous Nino noise. Like his mother's room's like literally right next door to that.
Right, yeah, I thought this throughout the whole movie.
Why did no one get up?
Yeah. For me, the biggest offender of that was where it's like she teleports the daughter into the locked room and she's screaming and banging on the door, and then the mother goes to try and unlock it, and then Ed and Lorraine just run out after that. It's like, how many people are in this house? How many are shouting? I did get a bit lost with that. I couldn't remember which family members were in the next door neighbour's house and which ones were in the main house. That got a little bit confusing for me, and it seemed to me like members of the family just showed up. Like the kids, she's got 2 sons. I thought she had 1 son for like 3/4 of this movie, and then when one like kid steps up and goes, "Oh, we need to protect our family because family comes first," I was like, "Wait, who's this kid? Wait, she had a 2nd son? Oh,
that's exactly what I thought. But I thought there's a scene in it where they all like run into the Janet's room early on in the movie or like halfway through, and there's like the stuttery kid, the King's Speech kid, as I'll call him. He as it cuts back to them, there's the other boy just sort of holding him, and I thought, hold on, that's a ghost. What? When did she have 2 sons?
Characters just pop out of nowhere. Yeah, I'll agree with that. But that whole thing you said where, how does no one hear all this stuff going on in the house? I will completely agree with that. And then the ending, you sort of get, the Elvis Presley scene. Let's talk about this. We'll sort of round off with this and give our overall thoughts on it afterwards. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was a nice bit of levity. It broke up the film, what was becoming a very sequential order of nighttime haunting scenes. I thought it was a really, really nice character moment. As soon as they mentioned Elvis records, I thought Elvis is going to come back into this somewhere. Unfortunately, it wasn't the ghost of Elvis, because that would have been amazing if they did that. So Patrick Wilson picks up an acoustic guitar. He does Can't Help Falling in Love with You. And the very, very ending shot of this film, it kind of mirrored, up to a point, the ending of the first film, where it goes back to that room from the first one with all the haunted items, and you do see the Annabelle doll, and I think you see that kind of music box thing from the first Conjuring on the shelf as well. And I thought this film, if it ended like the first one, could have had a very effective, lingering, haunting shot of just the chair, because it comes up that the real life events that the mum, Peggy, died in the chair. But then we get one more reprise of the Elvis Presley stuff, and it's Ed and Lorraine back at their house. She puts it on the record player, and then the two dance together. It's very cheesy, it's very corny, but I loved all that stuff, and I'm very torn because I think it needed to be in the film with the two dancing to that song, but I also think that as a horror film, sometimes it's best to leave you on that one shot, that one creepy final shot. It's like the ending of The Shining, where it zooms up on the photograph of Jack Nicholson at the Overlook Hotel from the 20s. What did you think of that ending shot? And then we'll sort of wrap up our review of it.
Well, it was very sentimental. And I'm not sure I enjoyed it. I quite liked the Elvis guitar, where he plays guitar.
He does the impressions of Elvis as well.
That was very good. But just want to sort of go back a step before I sort of talk about the ending. That that Jack Skellington thing?
Oh, the Crooked Man.
I didn't touch on it. Really. It was one of the more unintentionally funny bits in the movie, for me especially. And the whole thing where it just I just thought, are we watching The Babadook now, which is by far a better horror movie than this,
especially when it morphs out of the dog as well. Like when they have the dog. Yeah, exactly. Like when they have the dog ringing the bell, I thought, they're setting up something creative here, and it never entirely pays off. It pays off into the Crooked Man thing. Crooked Man comes stop motion jaggedly down the corridor singing the nursery rhyme, and then that morphs into Janet again.
Yeah.
It was but also with this horror film, I got this with the first one, I get this with every horror film though. They have yet to still have the ability of making someone getting picked up in the air by an invisible entity and flung across a room and make that scary for me, because I find that hilarious every single time I watch it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have no idea what James Wan was on with that whole Crooked Man thing. That was like an antagonist from a completely different horror film.
Yeah.
Really wildly out of place in this film. Kind of drew me out of the film a bit, that bit.
But yeah, this is what I said at the beginning. It will make you want to go listen to Elvis, and it did. And when we finish recording this, I'm going to listen to Elvis pretty much non-stop.
You know what? I will too.
And I don't know. Like I said, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't very good. And you could telegraph all the beats. Yeah, that's probably where I'll just sort of leave it. To be honest, that was my overall impression of the film. For me,
this would be a film where if they decide to end it off here, I'd be fine with that. They kind of were trying to bleed the franchise dry when they did bring Annabelle out. Maybe the next one, if we always get like a Conjuring film and then a spin-off film with whatever the ghost was, maybe we'll get a spin-off of The Crooked Man and it will be glorious and I will love it. Maybe they'll do a Conjuring 3. I'm sure there's more cases they can do with Ed and Lorraine character. And I'll go and see it. If James Wan's still on board, I'll go and see it. But the diminishing returns of this franchise are starting to show a little bit. But that being said, I still thought it was a solid horror film. As sequels go, I thought it was decent. I didn't like it as much as the first one, but it does have the character moments in there. It does still have some great performances, and some of the scares in the film are effectively done when it does build that atmosphere and it doesn't rely on jump scares. So, yeah, I think I've pretty much said everything I can about The Conjuring 2. If you have, we'll close out. Yeah, okay, so that'll do it for our review on Conjuring 2. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of The Conjuring 2. Let us know what you thought of the first one and Annabelle, and would you like to see a third one in this series? Also, let us know what you think of James Wan's previous work. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, I believe next week is Independence Day Resurgence, which is probably going to be awful, but I will be there at that because it looks like the kind of action schlock I like. What else is coming up? We'll have our Game of Thrones discussion show, I think on Monday, actually. Usually we do it on Tuesday, but I think we're doing it Monday. That's episode 9. That's going to be the big one. And also next week on Sunday, which is the 26th, we'll be doing our 3rd episode of Timestamp Zero, which is a show where you get to vote on which film we watch, and we all sit down in a discuss the film, watch it, love it, rant about it, whatever it is. The My Picks this month, some great picks on there. You can find the link to get voted on that in the straw poll link. That will be in the description. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
And also more film reflections.
Yes, I believe you've got some scripted, right? You just need to get them filmed at this point.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's kind of been a process of elimination of all the films I kind of want to do for it, and where I'll sit down, watch a film a night, and then research the hell out of what the content I want in it, and then it's just a case of getting them recorded. And I mean they will take time, and I suppose I have been a bit lackadaisical with them.
You're also fighting your laptop though as well, weren't you, with some technology problems?
Tech problems are just irate.
But you can find the first 2 episodes of that. So far you've done Blade Runner and the Assassination of Jesse James. Go on.
To come, we've also got War of the Worlds, Stand By Me, The Fountain, and The Truman Show.
Awesome. Well, I hope you do get back to it at some point, because it's a great series. You go really in depth and bring up some great points about those films, and I'd like to see more of them. I'd like to see your take on everyone's favourite Tom Cruise film, War of the Worlds. So yeah, that'll pretty much do it for our video today. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to keep updated with all of our content. I'll be jumping on some reactions as well, probably in the upcoming week, so look out for those. And until next time, we'll see you then. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much.